Hello, beautiful souls. It is wonderful to have you on. It's Regina Huber, your show host and CEO of Transform Your Performance. I am here today in Miami Beach. As you know, I'm tuning in from different parts of the world from time to time, but it is Miami Beach again this week, Miami Beach, Florida, North America. If you are joining me for the first time, you should know that I am an adventurous, eclectic nomad with my business Transform Your Performance, which is currently based in New York City. You may not always see me in the same spot, as I just said, as I love traveling around on our earth. I love exploring new cultures, meet people from different places, and also hear different languages, eat different foods, all of the good stuff. Yes, I'm a movement human being. I love movement, moving around. I love dancing. I love long walks, long bike rides. And I also have moved, I don't know how many times, to different neighborhoods, cities, countries, and continents. At some point, I stopped counting. I think after 35 moves or so, I stopped counting. I'm a free spirit, and all I do is in the service of freedom, the freedom to speak up, stand out, and shine. And that's why I also made this my book title, Speak Up, Stand Out, and Shine. I'm so very grateful that my travels have allowed me to broaden my horizon and to open my mind in this way, to increase my spirit of freedom. And so today, I want to talk about freedom. But before I do, let me quickly tell you about the why behind this show. Why am I doing this? And why do I address so many different diverse topics? So we did talk a lot about leadership in the last few episodes. And there's a lot of subtopics to leadership, of course. It's a very broad topic. So today I want to talk about freedom because I do believe that is very strongly related to leadership, and especially to courageous leadership. Well, but back to the why behind the show really quickly. My eclectic life and experience on 5 continents has allowed me to become a multicultural and multilingual transformational leadership coach and inspirational speaker. And while I was traveling and living on different continents, or have been, I should say, because I'm still doing it, I have seen an infinite variety of sparkling brilliance in people all over the world. Everyone I have met has a special spark. And the truth is, though, that not everybody has ignited this spark and turned it into a flame. And that's what I want you to do. And that's why it is my mission through this show to inspire you to ignite a flame wherever your path leads you, and to fuel that flame and turn it into a strongly burning fire so it can shine your brightest light and increase your influence and impact. And in this way, also influence and impact your income, your bank account, your impact as value-driven leaders, dear viewers, who stand up for the freedom of humans in your very own way. Whether you're a business owner or an employee, it doesn't matter, right? You are here because you're interested in these topics. See, value-driven impact requires courage, but it also means we need a good amount of freedom, and freedom comes in many shapes, doesn't it? So let's be bold and live in freedom, shall we? Freedom of the mind and of thought, financial freedom, freedom of movement, as I just described to you, freedom of speech, freedom of choice, freedom to do what we came here to do, to live in our purpose. What's Your Spark is about how you can show up more powerfully in business and in leadership, more free, or rather freer, and sparkle your unique leader brilliance out to the world freely. Beam like a dazzling star with it. Shine with such a bright light that people have to put on their sunglasses in your presence. Today's episode is all about that bright sparkle of yours through freedom. Freedom in big letters. Okay, that's really important. It's not just a mini freedom. It's the real freedom I want to talk about. So what's really important to recognize is that freedom is not the absence of anything. It's not the lack of something. Yeah, it's freedom to do or to become something, be something, not freedom from something or without something, because freedom comes from within, not from without. So often we hear people say, or maybe we say it ourselves, that they are free from something like sickness, drugs, or whatnot, right? Let me give you some examples. Drug-free, alcohol-free, sugar-free, cancer-free, gluten-free, free of addiction, and the list goes on, right? We have so many expressions like that. We use these words all the time, but they are not really about freedom, are they? Okay, if a drug addict, if you were a drug addict, I'm not assuming that, but you would certainly not be very free. And when you free yourself from drugs, as we say, then you get rid of drugs in your life and you declare that they have no space in it, then you do gain some freedom for sure. But, unless you replace the void with something else that doesn't serve you, that freedom will go away really quickly, right? So it doesn't come only from that. I know this firsthand because I used to smoke tobacco for a very long time, many, many years, and at times quite a lot. And yes, I do feel much better without smoking, but it took me a while. And at first, it didn't always feel like freedom at all, although I was tobacco free, right? Because freedom is a state of mind. I was actually suffering, and that's not freedom. When I quit smoking, that's not freedom, right? Freedom doesn't come from the absence of something. True freedom only comes from freedom itself. What does that mean? You will need to find this freedom for yourself before you even can get rid of whatever you want to get rid of. Yeah, and before you can even feel it, you must declare it. The freedom comes first, and then you can take the next step. Works much better because freedom is a state of mind. I hope that makes sense. I know it's very abstract. But think about it, right? And if it doesn't make sense to you right now, consider this. You can be a prisoner in a prison cell. And if you can practice freedom of mind, you can actually be freer than someone who's walking around outside and is trapped in their limiting beliefs. Those invisible prison walls they have built around themselves. And we all do it, right? Some more, some less. But if their limiting beliefs are strong, they will not be able to achieve or create what they want, independently of the effort they put toward these goals they have, and independently of whether they are outside of a prison or in a prison, a physical one. Right? Because we can only achieve what we believe we can achieve. So we must practice freedom to achieve, freedom to do, to have, not freedom from something in order to make progress. Now, of course, as I said earlier, freedom comes in many shapes. And it means different things to different people. And I certainly would prefer to have all the possible freedoms, all the possible forms of freedom for you, for me, for everybody. So let's look at some examples. My eclectic life and experience on 5 continents wouldn't have been possible without freedom of movement, the freedom to move. This is both an external freedom and an internal freedom, admittedly. Yes, external because I wasn't in a prison cell and no one forced me to stay in the same location or country I was in or I was born in. And internal because I took the inner freedom to move. I could have been trapped there and I could have had the desire to move. I mean, you don't have to have the same desires as I do, right? But I could have had the desire to move, but I couldn't have myself granted that freedom for some reason, right? But, no one's forced me to move. I chose to. I claimed this freedom for myself. This freedom served me a big array of adventures along the way, right? Of lessons, of learnings, opportunities to open my mind, so-called failures as well, which I now call feedback or stepping stones into greater consciousness. That's because anything we learn along the way, if we use it right, gives us greater consciousness. I've had incredible opportunities to grow, and I took the freedom to move. I chose to walk, and I chose to walk on a specific path, right? And that brings me to freedom of choice. We all have it at all times, even when it doesn't look like it. We often blame circumstances. We sometimes also say or hear, I didn't have a choice. That is never really true. You always have a choice. For example, if your employer mandates something you do not want, if they come up with new rules that maybe weren't in your original employee agreement that you signed, then you can absolutely refuse to comply. Or if it's too much of a hassle and you don't want to go through all of that, then you can walk away. You can find a place that better suits you, that's better for you. Whatever those new rules are, it doesn't matter, right? Or if the leadership changes, if the structural or the organizational structure changes in that organization, there's a change that you don't like, you're free to take the consequences and make a different decision and move on. Yes. And you can walk away and find a place that's better. The same is true for any relationships. Admittedly, it's harder when family is involved, but it's possible. Everything is just a decision away, really. Once you make a committed decision, it gets easier to take action and actually walk away, but it has to be a committed decision, a declaration to self. Now, let's move on to freedom of speech. Well, currently we see very strong censorship everywhere and sharp infringement of freedom of speech on social media and also in the media in general, everywhere we look, right? It seems almost even with book outlets where books are scrapped if they are too far from the mainstream narrative, or if they contradict that narrative. Then they're just removed. Yeah, they're just left out of the leading bestseller list. The modern book burning, right? So you could say we do not have freedom of speech. Well, listen, I still claim my freedom of speech anyway. I have never given up on it, and I won't. I will always speak my truth. I will continue speaking my truth until I leave this earth. It's just who I am. It's my personal freedom. No one can take that freedom away from me. It's deeply anchored in me. It's so deeply rooted that it cannot be unrooted. You just can't. Freedom of speech is closely tied to freedom of thought. Most people think they have freedom of thought. I remember a song from my childhood that went something like this. Die Gedanken sind frei, which means our thoughts are free. But are they really? Do we consciously choose our thoughts? Do we consciously think our thoughts? Or are our thoughts more often thinking us? Where are they even coming from? Why are our minds so busy? We are so used to being programmed and conditioned from the outside that we don't even notice it. But here's the thing. If we want to improve our results, we have to change the quality of our thoughts first. We talked about that in previous episodes when the topic was mindset, more specifically a self-empowering mindset. Yeah. Robert Collier, an American author, said, now he wrote books on prosperity and related topics, and he said, I quote, let me find that quote real quick here. Every condition, every experience of life is a result of a mental attitude. We can do only what we think we can do. We can be only what we think we can be. We can have only what we think we can have. What we do, what we are, what we have, all depend upon what we think. We can never express anything that we do not first have in mind. Yes. Everything around us is an expression of our consciousness. So what does this quote exactly mean? We cannot go beyond where we think we can go with anything we want in life. So we must become the observers of our thoughts so we can upgrade our mental software and get rid of all those viruses in our minds. This way we can become more conscious creators of the reality we want and the results we want to see from our actions, right? Our work, our efforts. We want to be conscious creators of achievement, conscious participants in the universe that we are a part of. And that's also important to realize we are a part of it. The universe is not something outside of us, right? See, the universe is actually also inside of us, right? And so all of this is affected by our freedom or lack thereof, the freedom to create what we want, to see it in our physical reality. Because everything we look at changes as we look at it, as we observe it, and nothing exists without the observer. The entire universe is inside of us. Yeah, I think we talked about this in a previous episode when we talked about holograms. And I find that really fascinating. But let me not get sidetracked here too much. Back to freedom, because it's all related to freedom. Yes. Actually, this quote by Collier is a perfect segue to financial freedom. Now, let me ask you this. What does financial freedom mean to you? What is it for you? How would it be expressed? Is it having thousands in your bank account? Is it having millions in your bank account? Is it owning a large house and a car, or having a big paycheck every month? See, while a good amount of money in the bank or in some other form, it could come in some other form, right? It doesn't always have to be in the bank, but it can certainly give us greater peace of mind. But for me, someone who has experienced a huge financial loss myself in the past, financial freedom is actually not so much about that. It's more about the certainty, the knowing that I can create financial wealth again, should it be taken away. Yes, there are circumstances for all of us. There are learnings. They never end because there's always limiting stuff in our minds and in our system that we need to let go of. So our freedom becomes more potent. But see, that's the real financial freedom, to know that if you ever lose money, even if it's everything, you can earn it back. You have that freedom. Isn't that amazing? See, real freedom is a state of mind, and real freedom requires mastery. It requires mastery of the mind, be in control of our feelings, to be at the steering wheel of our attention. Where do we want to steer our attention to? You've certainly heard more than once that what we focus on expands. What we put our attention to, that's where our energy flows. And that's why what we put our attention to also grows. It expands, it becomes bigger. So if we use our thoughts to put our attention to limitation, then this limitation will grow and our freedom will be affected. On the other hand, if we put our attention to what makes us feel expansive and free, then our freedom is increased. Because I will say it again, freedom is a state of mind. So I suggest that you practice feeling free, practice the feeling of freedom. Yeah, do it right now. Close your eyes and feel the feeling of freedom. What does that feel like to you? Take a moment and do it. And open your eyes. And if this was difficult, do it again after the show. Practice. Freedom from is not complete freedom. See, so many of our words have been hijacked, and so many terms have been coined that make no sense when we deeply explore them. Words like time management. Time can, of course, never be managed. Or words like work-life balance. There's no such thing. We can only determine our priorities, set priorities, and then stick to them. But there is never gonna be exact balance, right? And plus, work is part of life. And yet we use these terms all the time, just because they have been common use, even if they make no common sense. Freedom is not the lack of something. It's a state of mind in itself. Freedom is not being free from. Freedom is being free to. Free to do what we want with our lives, free to move where we want, free to travel where we want, and when we want and how we want. Well, I'm still waiting to see our DNA upgraded to fully use it and to really beam ourselves to where we want to go. But hey, it's not impossible. Even that will be possible at some point, right? And it's been shown to us so many times in movies. So interesting, right? But anyway, freedom is to do professionally what we want to do. And are you doing that right now? If not, why not? What's keeping you from doing it? Could it be yourself, your thoughts, your limiting beliefs? You can do anything, or at least almost anything, most things you set your mind to. Yeah. What is the freedom to you want to feel? Why are you not currently feeling it? Who's preventing you from feeling that freedom to create the results you want? Could it be you, yourself? And if so, why are you preventing yourself from going after what you really want? Is your desire a burning desire, really? Is your spark strong enough to ignite that flame? If not, what other spark can you find in yourself, inside of you? See, we don't want freedom for freedom's sake, even though it's absolutely worth it. The feeling of freedom is unbeatable in its richness, in its bliss. Real freedom. But more often than not, we want to feel this freedom in order to achieve something through it, with it, right? I have found that I can feel freedom most easily in my heart. When I moved away from Germany, I didn't know what to expect. I just followed my heart. My heart knew that this was the right path. And you know what? I know it was hard for my mom at the time and for a long time after. This was at a time when international phone calls were expensive and there was no Zoom or FaceTime. But I had to make a decision to live my own life and not the life of others. And see, I sometimes felt lonely at first because I hadn't learned to connect with my spiritual power quite yet. I wasn't as comfortable with myself as I'm now. And spending long periods of time with self could sometimes make me feel uneasy and isolated. Yeah. But I still knew it was the right decision because it came from my heart. So I also gave myself the freedom to move back if I decided to, back to Germany, potentially after a year. But then I stayed in Spain for 7 years, and then I spent 6 months in Brazil, and I moved back to Germany for a couple of years after that. Although, for a job where I constantly traveled internationally while I was living back in Germany. But see, so my heart called me away again. And I moved to Argentina this time. I was also back for work in Brazil for a few months. And from Argentina, I moved to California, and from there to Argentina again to open my own business, and then another business in Brazil after 3.5 years in Argentina, and so on and so forth. Yeah. And eventually I moved to New York City. But even while I was in New York City, I was constantly traveling. In the later years, mostly to the African continent. In the past 2 years, I've been to Mexico a few times. I've just been exploring also a few other places in the US. I'm spending most of my time now in Miami or Miami Beach, but you know, that might change again. And I have other plans, different plans for the not so far future as well. This is a piece of my freedom. What is yours? I really invite you to think about this. Not your freedom from, but your freedom to. So many people are not experiencing freedom right now at all. You know, they just cannot find it in this situation. Many of us are feeling the oppression, of course, that's being pushed upon us. This power that's exerted over us, this power over others, right? Which is the evil spirited power that wants to see others small and without freedom, not the real good power. But you don't have to comply with what you know is not right. You go with your own freedom, what you think is right. And you don't have to succumb. You don't have to give in. You can declare yourself sovereign. Sovereignty, just another form of freedom, right? We are all spiritual beings in addition to human beings. And recognizing what that really means can give you a tremendous sense of freedom. True spiritual freedom. Can you find that spiritual power in yourself, that inner power, that real power, that freedom power? As I mentioned earlier, it's often easiest to find this in our heart. So if you'd like to learn easy ways to connect with your heart, check out my YouTube channel. There's an entire playlist on how to harness your heart power. My YouTube channel is called Regina Huber, just like my name. Subscribe to get all the goodies and also watch the other videos. And you will find much more inspiration there as well. Also, lots of leadership content, lots of career advancement, inspiration and tips. As you can see, many of my playlists are about leadership, as I just said. There's really a lot of inspiration and practical tips in them, techniques, tools that you can implement on your own very, very easily. And once you got your tools, it's all about consistency. And you'll also gain more freedom to show your spark. I also invite you to visit my website, transformyourperformance.com, and go to the bio page. As you scroll down on that page, you will find a long list of articles and podcast interviews, radio, TV interviews with lots of valuable information and inspiration. Definitely read my latest articles on Medium and also for the corporate magazine. They're also listed on my website with the corresponding links. I have put all of this together for you so you can live in more freedom and in your purpose. And I do hope to see you next Wednesday again at the same time, 2 p.m. Eastern, here in the same place. And in the meantime, as always, keep shining in your brightest light. Sparkle away like the precious pearl you are, because the world is your oyster. If you make it so, and if you keep a free state of mind, keep that spirit of freedom always present in you. And be free by practicing a freedom state of mind in the meantime, right? Really practice that feeling of freedom. So I'll see you next Wednesday, same time, same place.